Welcome to the 60th episode of Rising Tide, the Ocean Podcast. This is David Helvarg, and our co-host, Vicki Nichols-Goldstein, is off at a UN conference. Luckily, Natasha Benjamin of Blue Frontier can join us as we talk with Farah Obaidullah, founder of Women for Oceans. A graduate of Imperial College in London with a master's in biology, Farah spent over a decade as senior oceans campaigner for Greenpeace, traveling across the world ocean, working on a range of issues, including illegal pirate fishing and human slavery at sea. Later, she founded Women for Oceans and is today a leading figure in the global fight for a moratorium on deep sea mining. So, lots to cover. Farah, maybe we can start with how you first connected with the sea and your first beach cleanup at age 5.
Thank you, David. That takes me back. So my first connection with the ocean, my parents would probably say it was when my mom was swimming off the Florida Keys when she was pregnant with me. So that probably triggered something. But I grew up by the sea, mostly in the Netherlands, but also in West Africa, in Gabon. And I always remember being in awe of the sea, the ocean, the wild waves, the moody weather and clouds above it. And so I honestly can't remember a time that I wasn't fascinated by the ocean. I grew up in the 80s where plastic wasn't necessarily a thing, but even in the 80s, I'd see people littering, throwing their cans on the beach or in the ocean. And it would enrage me because, that's not a behavior that we would ever find acceptable at home. And I just felt that just seeing that kind of assault on nature, it didn't sit right. And so I knew at a very young age that I wanted to do something about it. And of course, from plastic pollution came a whole bunch of other issues I learned quickly when I lived in Gabon about deforestation, the rainforest. Being deforested at an unprecedented rate. And even as a kid, I could see that happening. So I can't pinpoint a single moment, but it was a gradual sort of accumulation of observations that led me to my passion or my commitment to the ocean and to protect it. And that's what I've been doing for the past 20 years or so.
And so you sort of grew up a travel over the world. I assume that was your parents and not you doing that as a child.
Yes, as a child, that's the case. And also because I'm biracial, bicultural, I spent a lot of time between the Netherlands and Pakistan, which also has beautiful beaches. I was privileged enough to travel with my parents, but also my jobs have taken me to many places. You mentioned Greenpeace, of course, sailing on the Greenpeace ships to some of the most remote places on Earth, but also seeing some of the most egregious practices happening to our oceans. Seeing countless numbers of sharks being culled and killed. Cetaceans, whales, and dolphins, but also just the sheer number of fish that is being taken from our ocean every day of every year. And at one point, it doesn't take, a scientist to wonder when the ocean is going to empty. So those were just all sort of big signs for me that I've got to keep doing what I'm doing. And, and it doesn't matter what the issue is, from, slavery at sea to deep sea mining. It all matters. We have to make sure that we safeguard the ocean, because without the ocean, we wouldn't be here. So, yeah.
When you went to get your biology degree and master's at Imperial College, were you thinking this is a great career path to be a Greenpeace campaigner?
No, actually, no. I to be honest, I didn't know. So my interest in the ocean meant that people around me, my parents included, they just assumed, well, therefore you have to study marine biology and become a scientist and work in a lab or work on a boat. And so that was kind of the path that I thought, or I assumed I had to take. So yeah, I did my first degree in biology and my second degree in environmental technology, but I knew sort of after my master's that I didn't necessarily want to be an academic. As much as I respect and admire all my science colleagues, and of course we need science to inform us, I myself didn't see myself doing research. What I saw myself doing was, yes, spending time on and in the ocean, but more as an advocate, as someone that comes up for the ocean and that uses that scientific information and communicates that to the world and affects change, whether that's change in my community or change at the policy level. So yeah, I did those degrees, but I also knew in the back of my mind that I wasn't going to be a research scientist, and that somehow I was going to, lend my voice to the movement of defending the ocean.
So how did you connect with Greenpeace and end up going to sea?
Well, it's a funny story because it was a few years ago, I found an essay that I had written when I was about 13 years old, as I was clearing out my stuff. And that essay was about a dream I had where these dolphins were washed up on the beach in New Zealand. And so what I did was I contacted Greenpeace, and we went out to sea to take on the tuna industry, the tuna fishers, because they were responsible for these dolphin deaths. Now, this essay, I literally dug it up maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and I'd forgotten all about it. But I have lived that dream and that essay twice. I've been out to the Pacific Ocean to take on tuna trawlers as part of Greenpeace campaigns. So I would say my connection with Greenpeace started quite early, unknowingly. But then I suppose, so I worked as an environmental consultant when I graduated, which, was the first kind of job that I could have. And it was a good job. I traveled a lot. I worked for the private sector doing due diligence, environmental due diligence. It was a very corporate career, and I was climbing quite rapidly. But after 4 years, I thought to myself, but this is, again, not what I imagined myself doing. It wasn't my passion. And I knew that if I didn't get out then, I would be stuck in this, albeit, great career. It wouldn't be doing what I was passionate about. So I then spent some time looking at what, where could I fit in, and obviously the nonprofit world, that's where the stuff on oceans was happening. So I was looking around for jobs in the nonprofit sector. I ended up working for Seas at Risk, which is a European federation of NGOs working to protect the ocean. And I also worked for the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition at the time. So I had 2 jobs. And all of that led me to, to be introduced and immersed in the work of Greenpeace, which I thought was awesome. Who doesn't think that's awesome? Going, they have ships and they have all these toys and they have all these means, but also they are independent and they're able to speak to issues simply with the truth. They're not dependent on funding from anybody else. And so that spoke to me. I thought, well, this is where I could really be myself. With all the privilege that comes with such a huge organization like Greenpeace. So I guess it just, one thing led to another. And after a year of joining the nonprofit sector, I actually jumped over to Greenpeace and then spent 11 years with Greenpeace. And that was fantastic.
And now you've created Women for Ocean after your experience with Greenpeace. And I can relate to, the background in science, but wanting to be an advocate for the ocean, really understanding the science, but wanting to get involved in a way to change policy and make a difference. So I'd love to hear more about how Women for Ocean, where that came from and what that means for you.
In all my travels and all my sort of experience working for the ocean, one thing that struck me was the number and sort of an amazing number of women, but also amazing sort of people that were working for the ocean around the world, whether it was at the community level, in fishing communities. The women were often sort of very strong characters. They understood what was going on with fish in their seas and with the marine environment and how that was being degraded, but also at the international level, at the sort of political level, lobbying the corridors of power at the United Nations, and but also here in the Netherlands. And I would just see that whilst there were many amazing women doing incredible work, we were not on the sort of at the high level of making decisions. So we were not represented where we needed to be. And so it wasn't a lack of women, it was more the representation of women. And then I started to think about that, as well as my sort of background in biology. I just wondered, what we are doing that's so at odds with the natural world and compared with other species. And it just occurred to me, well, one thing we do, which other animals don't do, is we ignore half of our population. We literally ignore half our species and their contributions to, to our civilization. And we've done that for centuries. And And of course, things are improving, but all our systems are basically designed by and for half of our demographic. And so I just wondered what it would be like if we were equally represented and equally shaping the course of humanity as women. And that I thought, well, maybe we need to try that. Maybe we just need to improve our representation. And it goes beyond women. It also goes to just our diversity as people on this planet. We very much have adopted a one system that we're trying to implement around the world, but that system is failing us, and that system, was developed and formed by just a handful of people. So I strongly believe we have to change that, and so that's why I set up Women for Oceans. I just thought, well, why don't we just begin with highlighting the women, the incredible women that are out there, as a way also to inspire more people into the ocean movement, and also inspire people from different backgrounds into the ocean movement. So it really is about the ocean. It always is for me, but it's about trying to look through a different lens, and trying to achieve outcomes, positive outcomes, faster by embracing our diversity, really. So that's why I set it up.
You were moving from a multinational organization, Greenpeace, that's global in scope, as you said, it has its own fleet of ships and operations, to starting an independent NGO. And how'd you launch? And I mean, like, what women did you talk to? How did you just get it rolling?
I set it up as a platform, just for women to connect, and so it started off as a Facebook group, and then a directory on the website. And I didn't intend for it to become an NGO, but very quickly I did need to set it up as an NGO in order to have the infrastructure and be able to accept funding, because there were people that were interested in supporting my mission. So I thought, okay, this is going to happen. So it wasn't something that I had initially planned. It was more sort of, I wanted to facilitate more women being able to be represented in the ocean space, and it was missing. So I can't pinpoint a single person that inspired me to do that. I think it's everybody inspires me. So it's all the amazing work and of people that I've seen in all my travels and in my work that inspired me to set this up. So, and here we are. There's now 5,000 women around the world that have joined the network. And actually, I've just handed in a manuscript for the book "The Ocean and Us," which is a book that talks about all the different ways that our lives interact with the ocean in an easy to digest way. Each chapter is written by a different expert. There's some 32 chapters, I believe. So it really covers all the ways, all aspects of the ocean and people, from marine animal welfare to the blue economy to oil spills to plastic pollution and overfishing and so on and so forth. But also, importantly, it also introduces the idea that we need better representation in the ocean space, and the idea that many people, they do continue to feel left out of being able to participate equally in matters concerning the ocean, simply because of who they are, because of their identity. So this extends beyond just gender, but really into sort of our intersectional sort of identities and how that affects our participation. So it covers a broad range of issues. And again, that brings together the expertise of over 35 women from the Women for Oceans network, all experts in their field. And that will be launched, hopefully in the fall of this year. So look out for that.
Congratulations. Awesome. That's wonderful. And I believe Women for Ocean really, it does two things. It connects this group of women that are working towards protecting our oceans, and it also, you've been able to highlight and elevate some of those stories, which then inspires others, inspires that next generation, and that's really critical. And you definitely feel it. From when I went to graduate school to now, there's so many more young women that have emerged in this field.
Well, unfortunately, we still have a long way to go. So David, you probably know this, as do you, Tash, but the number of fish stocks in our world's oceans is declining. And there's something like close to 90% of all fish stocks around the world are either fully fished or overfished, or depleted or gone. So it's not looking very promising. Of course, there are initiatives that, that are trying to turn things around. The EU have made certain steps in terms of eliminating IUU fishing, which is illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing, basically fish crimes happening at sea, which account for so much of the destruction happening in our oceans. But really, the problem is what happens out at sea just doesn't engage people in the same way as it does on land. If we were to just clear fell forests, to catch a few parrots to put in our soup or to garnish with our fries, we would not accept that kind of destruction. But unfortunately, it happens out at sea, out of sight and out of mind of everyday people, but also out of sight and out of mind of governments themselves and enforcement agencies. So there's still a big, long road ahead of us in terms of turning things around. And of course, it doesn't help that we have the climate crisis, which is fueling further destruction in the ocean, as well as pollution and other threats.
You almost think that, is there any environment on the planet that hasn't been exploited? Is there like a large oceanic environment that we don't know a lot about and that we haven't exploited yet? And that might be a segue into deep sea mining.
The deep sea, I mean, that's for sure a huge part of the planet that is unexplored. And hopefully probably largely pristine, although we know that plastic pollution has infiltrated every part of our ocean, including the deep sea. So how far it's pristine compared with 100, 200 years ago, that remains questionable. But certainly there's a lot still to discover in the ocean, and that's what's so exciting about the ocean. It's like this endless kind of undiscovered frontier. And I think that excites young people and anybody really, because it really can fuel your imagination. What's down there? There's such slow growing life in the deep ocean. You have fish that are older than your grandmother. You have corals that can live several thousand years old. There's the Greenland shark, lives up to 400 years old. So there's so much amazing life down there that we are only just beginning to explore and to discover. But at the same time, with any sort of discovery and any sort of move into a new frontier comes exploitation, or the desire to exploit. And the same is true of the deep ocean. So in the deep ocean, in certain areas, there are mineral deposits, and that is now of interest to a new industry called deep sea mining. So there's three types of areas that could potentially be mined for minerals, because they're rich in deposits. And these are the abyssal plains, where these polymetallic nodules sit, which I'll get into because that's the most, at the moment, currently desired type of deposit that the miners are seeking. But there's also mineral deposits on things like hydrothermal vents and the cobalt crusts on seamounts. So there's a lot of interest to go into the deep ocean and to mine it for these minerals.
I was just going to mention that our most recent podcast was with Don Walsh, who is one of the first two humans to ever to go to the deepest point on our planet, 7 miles down in the Marianas Trench back in 1960. And he was just saying he's kind of appalled at the idea that people return to the deep ocean to start mining without any of the environmental protections or scientific knowledge that we would have before we'd ever start any kind of industrial activity on the land. So the first pioneer of the deep ocean, the really deep ocean, is just kind of shocked that we're taking this approach. And maybe you can just speak to Don's concerns. Are we really not doing environmental studies before we talk about going and, mining the last unexploited habitat on Earth?
Well, I hope we do. I mean, look, there's still time to stop this. This is the thing about deep sea mining. So the idea is that these companies want to mine in international waters, so those areas that don't belong to any one country. So nobody's in charge sort of legally for these areas. There is a body called the International Seabed Authority, which has the sort of mandate to and protect the marine environment in the deep ocean, but also to manage deep sea mining, which is a contradiction in terms, because you can't manage the deep, can't protect the deep sea if you're going to be mining it. So it is a serious concern because, unlike on land, we're not going to go down. We're talking about 4 to 6 kilometers. I don't know what that is in miles, but a couple of kilometers down, that's where they want to go mine the deep sea, mine these minerals, these polymetallic nodules, which take millions of years to form, by the way. So it's not like, you remove them and then you reseed you replant some trees like you might on land. On land, you can regenerate an area. If you do it properly, you can bring back life relatively quickly. But in the deep ocean, where everything is slow growing, what I was saying earlier, it's slow growing. You're removing, in a very destructive way, you're removing these nodules that have taken millions of years to get there. You're causing huge sediment plumes in the process. You have to, again, imagine you're so deep in the ocean where everything moves slowly as well. So it's kind of these dust storms will arise from the mining activities, which will then be carried by currents over hundreds of kilometers from the mining areas themselves. And all of this, we scientists know and understand, but it hasn't happened yet. We cannot quantify exactly what the effect will be, other than that we know it's going to cause irreversible damage. Coming back to sort of the environmental, studies that you're talking about, environmental impact assessments. I mean, who is going to go down there and audit what the miners are doing, right? I mean, on land, you can send a team and say, okay, well, let's see how are they playing by the rules in this quarry or in this mine? In the ocean, that's not possible. We simply don't have that technology. The governments don't have that kind of money to go and audit in the deep ocean. Only the miners have the money, or at least not yet, but they're trying to sort of collect that money to develop the technology to go down there and mine. But there's no infrastructure to do any auditing. So this is serious. This is very concerning. And because it doesn't belong to any one country, there isn't a single country that is going to, show up in the same way they would if it was happening on their own soil. Myself, and many others are saying we shouldn't even go into the international waters. There's no adequate legal regime that is truly going to protect what happens there, because it doesn't belong to anybody. And that's a flaw, in my opinion, in the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, where we have basically left almost half our planet without any comprehensive legislation. It's a wild west. So, until and unless we have comprehensive legislation and we have a thorough scientific understanding of everything that will happen, right now we know it's going to be destructive, but what we don't know is how it's going to impact the very systems in the ocean that sustain life in the ocean and therefore life on the planet. So you can imagine that by causing these sediment plumes and disturbing the carbon that's stored and locked away in the seabed. The ocean, by the way, is our largest carbon sink on this planet. So if we're going to disturb all that carbon and that's going to come back into the water column, how is that going to affect the chemistry of the ocean? How is that going to, how long will it take for that carbon to be re-released back into the atmosphere? These are all questions we simply don't have answers to. And we need a lot more studies before we can even think about going down there to destroy the deep ocean. I'm with Mr. Walsh there all the way. We need to be concerned.
What you're hearing now is that these are the minerals we need to convert to transition off fossil fuels into the new technologies of the green economy. So I guess instead of greenwashing, you'd have to call that blue washing.
Right. No, absolutely. And of course, they'll look for any excuse. And right now we are sitting in, with multiple crises. We've got the climate crisis, we've got the biodiversity crisis, we've got this pandemic ongoing and the war in Ukraine. And so now is like the perfect moment for these miners to sort of fast track rules and regulations that would allow them to mine within, as little as a year, hopefully more than that. But, time is running out. And of course, because of the climate crisis, it's the message couldn't be better to say, yeah, but we need these minerals to fuel the transition economy, to wean us off fossil fuels, to put into our electric cars and our gadgets. But the industry themselves have acknowledged that there's enough metal on land to do that. So it's flawed. It's basically just jumping on the bandwagon of the climate crisis and then just using that message to their advantage. I mean, sure, those minerals that are in the deep ocean, they're manganese, cobalt, nickel. You could argue that, but they're being used in electric vehicle technology today. But the thing is, if we look at electric vehicle technology today, this is not our future. Think about an electric car. It takes half an hour to charge, right? It's not efficient. We can't take 1.7 billion cars off the road and replace them with today's technology of electric vehicles. And that's why companies, big car companies, like Tesla, like BYD, which is the world's second largest producer of electric vehicles, like Volkswagen, Renault, Volvo, all these major companies that are now sort of leading on also electric vehicle technology, they are saying no to deep sea mining. Now, they're saying this out of concern for the environment, I'm sure, but they're also saying this because they have the foresight to know that they won't be needing those metals in their batteries going forward because it's simply too expensive. And we need to be, transitioning on a huge scale, not just a hybrid Prius here or there, or Tesla for those that can afford it. This is a massive, transition in our mobility globally. And so for me, it reinforces the idea we don't need to be going into the deep sea. There are cheaper and more efficient ways of doing it, and car companies are demonstrating that. And that's why these companies, but also tech companies like Google, Samsung, Philips, companies are coming out and saying, no, we also don't need those metals for our gadgets. So I would argue, back to the mining industry, you're just being opportunistic and using the climate crisis as an excuse to mine the deep ocean.
You're saying the mining industry is not historically an environmental leader?
No, I guess not. No.
But this is amazing. I mean, I wasn't surprised to hear that 600 scientists and leading ocean advocates call for a moratorium on deep ocean mining. What is surprising is that you have the large and growing corporate sector, as you say, from Google to BMW to Panasonic, to all these companies that saying, no, they don't want deep ocean minerals. They're willing to take a look. And it's almost strange that the private sector is being more progressive than some of these coastal governments. We don't have a strong position out of a lot of governments to say no. And in fact, they're targeting places, the less developed parts of the world, like Cook Islands, to start promoting this drilling, this mining.
It's basically a new form of colonialism, or colonialism continued, where the areas that'll be most impacted are going to be small island states in the Pacific Ocean, because where they want to mine in the first sort of round is in an area called the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, which sits between Mexico and Hawaii. And we already know from studies that have been done by fisheries scientists that deep sea mining will impact tuna catches in the Pacific Ocean. So that's going to have knock-on effects, obviously, for the industry, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry. But I'm more concerned about the effects that it's going to have on local communities and their fish stocks. They are already suffering, as we just discussed, from industrial overfishing and the victims of industrial overfishing. And now we're going to add insult to injury and start mining in their backyard. So I mean, there's some big concerns there around equality as well, and who's going to benefit from these minerals.
This is our chance to be precautionary for once. Before this industry even begins, we have a chance to do the studies, understand what's happening in these deep sea ecosystems. We've only documented 5% of the deep sea. We don't even know what's down there. How can we go and extract these resources until we really understand what's there? So this is an opportunity, and I think you explained it so well in the film, In Too Deep, in terms of the impact, and also in terms of, like you were saying, the industry really actually being a leader in this case. The governments are behind the industry. Can you talk a little bit about the film and how that came about, and is that making an impact on this moratorium?
So first of all, the fact that deep sea mining doesn't happen yet gives me hope, right? Because unlike the climate crisis and other crises which we can see, and we feel helpless to do anything about, because how do we wean off of fossil fuels? We want to heat our homes, we want to do this, we want to do that. It's not within our power to get off of fossil fuels immediately. But with this industry, it hasn't started yet. There are no jobs at stake. There's no infrastructure in place. So we can nip this industry, so to speak, in the bud, right? But it needs momentum. It needs everybody to get engaged. When I started looking at this issue, I thought, well, so yeah, there's the hope story. It hasn't started yet. But also, people haven't heard of it. They don't know what this is and what's about to happen. And I can talk about it as much as I like, and I try to everywhere that I can. But what I felt was missing was just a concise kind of overview of what deep sea mining is and what it could look like and the devastation that it could have. And so that's how the film In Too Deep, The True Cost of Deep Sea Mining, was born. I commissioned, well, as you know, a great filmmaker to put the film together. We had interviews with experts scientists, but also a lady from BMW, the sort of the lead person on this issue from BMW. She spoke to why the industry is rejecting minerals from the deep ocean for their supply chains. And I thought that would be very powerful, because then it sort of signals, hey, this is not just some, group of environmentalists, again, rejecting something just for the sake of it or for whatever reason, because, which is what we often get as environmentalists. But this really, shows that, no, this is a kind of unified voice across many sectors, rejecting this industry and saying, hey, we can stop this before it starts. Let's do that. Let's stop it before it starts. And then personally, I think if we can do that, we would empower people everywhere to know that actually we have the power to stop environmental destruction. So if we could win this, then we can take that momentum, that energy to other environmental fights. Because I think people are at the moment feeling helpless. So what can we do? Forest fires here, floods there, war here, pandemic there. What can we do? It's almost like the world is imploding. But here's something we can actually do. We can stop this next destruction, which doesn't belong in our future, right? It's something from the past. It's a model of extraction that we decided to ditch as a global community through our sustainable development goals, through our push towards a circular economy. We decided we weren't going to do that linear model of take, make, break, waste. No, we're looking for something different, and it's within our reach. There's so many great initiatives out there that are trying to recover metals from waste streams, for example, bioleaching, also reducing our consumption, and all these innovations in energy and transport. I'm hopeful that if we could win this campaign, we will be on a new energetic path for a whole suite of different issues. So yeah, and that's how the film came to be, to answer your question. And I do encourage everyone to watch that, because it gives you, just in 18 minutes, it gives you a very good overview of what's at stake, why the deep ocean matters, and who's all saying no to deep sea mining.
It's an excellent film, and I love how this is such a great story of actually giving us hope that we can change something, we can change this path. It doesn't have to be this way. And this is our chance to be precautionary for once on our planet.
That's right.
Farah, thank you so much for your passion, your commitment, your work, and for joining us on Rising Tide Ocean Podcast today.
Thank you very much, David. And again, I encourage you to watch the film, but also to check out womenforoceans.org, find out more about our book, The Ocean and Us, and everything else there is about the ocean. So thank you.
Thank you, Farah.
Rising Tide is a production of Blue Frontier, co-hosted by David Helvarg and myself, Vicki Nichols-Goldstein, with support from Natasha Benjamin and Ellie Curlow. Rising Tide's editing services and additional technical support is provided by Studio Cape May. The theme song is written and performed by Ethan Kenbarg. You can find Rising Tide, the Ocean Podcast, at www.bluefront.org, or download it from Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Off in the salty ocean, off where the waves roll free, the sparkling water rises, then crashes to the sea. Out amongst the breakers, you'll have no need to fear. It's true, it's the Blue Frontier. Off in the salty ocean, off to the Blue Frontier.
Sparky, come here, buddy. Sparky! There you are. Good boy, Sparky.